the one that does the preaching here, for those who care to listen. Now, if there's anything that I can do...
Well, there's one thing you can do. Tell me why nobody around here will listen to me.
Well, if you want people to listen, you've got to tell them what they want to hear.
I told them the truth.
That's the last thing that most people want to hear.
Have you ever felt?
Are you listening?
Breakthrough Media.
This is a talk that I gave to a group of Christians. I asked them to become active in caring for the persecuted Christians around the world under Islam. If I were talking to Buddhists, atheists, or Jews, I would ask them to do the same thing, to help all those who are persecuted under Islam, which includes the Christians. We need to face the fact that whereas Kafirs, non-Muslims, may create a lot of divisions amongst themselves based on religion, amongst other things, that under Islam we're all Kafirs, and it will cause us all to submit. Therefore, we must unite together instead of attacking or ignoring each other. The audience may change, but the doctrine of the Kafir never does. Thank you. Well, my topic for today is a simple one: why political Islam is winning in the United States and why we are losing. Those two things go together, and so one of the things I want to talk to you today about is why we're losing and how that can be corrected. My inbox is an interesting place, but about election time, I got all kinds of panic because all of a sudden there were candidates who were Muslim who were running for office and they won. More panic, more alarm. Now the thing here is that the triumph of the Muslims who ran for office was planned 20 years ago, whereas most people's response to this event was simply, what? They're running for office? They told you they were going to run for office 20, 30 years ago. So what we see here is that Islam is capable of fantastic strategic planning. As a matter of fact, I'll say this: no one plans as well as the Muslim Brotherhood on strategic vision.
The erosion of American democracy.
If you think we're rallying now, you ain't seen nothing yet.
Anybody. They plan 10, 20 years out. Now, they prepare more than that. They also plan generational out. Now, let me assure you something, that the situation is worse than you think it is because those people who are supposed to help us push back on this issue are asleep at the wheel.
The erosion of American democracy.
And when your son looks at you and says, Mama, look, you won, bullies don't win. And I said, baby, they don't, because we're going to go in there, we're going to impeach them.
Freshman Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib opened her keynote speech at the Council on American Islamic Relations' 15th annual banquet. I wanted to start with what she said at the very beginning.
You know, we always said the Muslims are coming. Well, guess what? I think we're here. We're not only everywhere in all kinds of different governments, but mashallah, wow, we're in the United States Congress.
Now, let me assure you something, that the situation is worse than you think it is because those people who are supposed to help us push back on this issue are asleep at the wheel.
I want you to give this to any reasonable Democrat that you know, because I don't think Democrats hate the country. Some do, but so do some people on the right, I guess. We all are in this together. And ask them, if you believe the information surrounding President Trump's dealings with Russia are enough to warrant an investigation, imagine a scenario like this. Let's say word leaked out that actual Russian spies set up a propaganda and fundraising network here in the United States and used it to spread lies and advocate for Russian interests and bilk us of millions of dollars and give it to rebels. Then that organization got busted for it, outed in federal court, but despite that, President Trump would continue to use their information and actively fundraise for them here in the United States. I think you'd be out of your mind with rage. I know I would be. I'd be standing with everybody else who like, this has got to stop. I'm going to show you that's exactly what is happening with Congresswoman Omar. She is engaging in exactly the same thing. Exactly. I mentioned last week that Omar would be in Los Angeles to give the keynote address for the fundraiser for CARE, the Council on American Islamic Relations. As usual for Omar, the media just goes, oh yeah, okay, big deal. And oh boy, big deal, it's CARE. Well, let me give you a quick refresher on who CARE actually is. This is the actual court case from the United States of America versus the Holy Land Foundation. This case is so important because what it revealed was, for the first time, an elaborate scheme launched by the Muslim Brotherhood to tip American sentiment towards the Palestinians, tip it in policy, in sentiment, and to raise money to support Hamas. They were officially designated a foreign terrorist organization. Now, if anyone doubts whether the Muslim Brotherhood had a role in the creation of Hamas, or if they advocated for violence, you don't have to look any further than this. This is the official Hamas charter. Article 2 states, and if I may quote, the Islamic resistance movement, that's Hamas, is one of the wings of the Muslim Brotherhood in Palestine. The Muslim Brotherhood movement is a world organization, the largest Islamic movement in the modern era, end quote. Okay, so Muslim Brotherhood was involved, but it's a peace movement, you would say. Well, I'm sure it says it someplace in the charter. In fact, oh yeah, here it is in Article 13. And again, I quote, peace initiatives. The so-called peace solutions and all international conferences to resolve the Palestinian problem are all contrary to the beliefs of the Islamic resistance movement. Next page. There is no solution to the Palestinian problem except by jihad. All right. So the Muslim Brotherhood created Hamas very specifically to destroy Israel, but they also created Hamas support groups all over the world. So Hamas is in Palestine, then you have the Muslim Brotherhood up here, and this support group all over the world provided streams of cash to support their fighters. But it also worked to try to influence other countries to change their policies on Israel and support Hamas. The Muslim Brotherhood quickly moved into the United States, and they set up one of these networks. And let me show you. Here's the Muslim Brotherhood. Here's Palestine. They set up Hamas. Then all over the world, and here in the United States, they put the Palestine Committee together. The Palestine Committee was broken up into three parts. The United Association for Studies and Research, that's a think tank. The Islamic Association of Palestine, that's in charge of propaganda. And the Holy Land Foundation, that's the fund. They were in charge of procuring and funneling money back to Hamas terrorists in Palestine. These three people are this. Okay, these three people came down here and they created the propaganda arm of CARE. CARE was created as a tool for the Islamic Association of Palestine by those three men, Nihad Awad, Omar Ahmad, and Rafiq Jabbar. Now, Awad and Ahmad, these two, all right, were both caught via FBI wiretap at an infamous Philly meeting. This is where law enforcement were able to verify that the Palestinian Committee, the U.S.-based Muslim Brotherhood, was discussing how they were going to continue to support Hamas. I want you to remember this man's face. It's very important. Now, the official court document that was annotating who was at the meeting in Philly is right here. Both of these men attended. Both of these men were key speakers. Ahmad was the person that actually set up the meeting and led the opening remarks. These are the founders of CARE. It is absolutely indisputable. CARE is Hamas. Nihad Awad continues to lead CARE to this day. This is who Omar is fundraising for next week, the propaganda arm for the Muslim Brotherhood and Hamas. Now, how is it nobody is interested in this? How come no one is pointing this out? The question that we have to ask ourselves, if all of that is true, which it is and verifiable, please do your own homework. Congresswoman Omar, is she ignorant of CARE's true identity, or is she a willing accomplice? Well, we have to go back to where she was born. She was born in Somalia, Mogadishu, in 1981. Then, because of this horrible civil war in Somalia, she had to leave. In 1992, she went to Kenya. In 1995, she was approved as a refugee, and she settled in Virginia and then quickly moved to Minnesota. In 2011, she graduated from the Humphrey School of Political Science and International Studies. Okay, while she was there, the Humphrey School is a place that the CARE has their tentacles all over this Humphrey School of Public Affairs. So when Amar was at Humphrey, this was the type of conferences being held there. Islam in the West, with the goal of, quote, pursuing development and enhancing understanding between Muslims and Western worlds. Okay, not bad. This event was co-sponsored, of course, by the Minnesota chapter for the Council on American Islamic Relations. Remember, also known as Hamas, the propaganda arm. Last summer, CARE was at the Humphrey School leading a challenging Islamophobia conference. Now, was it during this time when she was at the University of Minnesota that Omar got mixed up with the Hamas front group? We don't know. But we do know this. She is now fundraising for CARE next week. And it has been reported on recently that she has been fundraising for them for years. This is a CARE Minnesota advertisement for a fundraiser back in 2017. One of the noted speakers was the then state representative, Ilhan Omar. But still, useful idiot, or is she a willing accomplice? Well, it's one thing to show up for a few events for CARE at her school or for some random fundraiser, but it's not like she actually worked for CARE, right? Well, let's take a quick peek at her resume, displayed full view on her own website. Look at the top. Under Community Leader, former advisory board member for Minnesota Council on American Islamic Relations. So we have a sitting member of Congress who raises money for and used to work with an organization with direct ties to the Muslim Brotherhood and Hamas, a U.S. designated terror group. Now, as I said, CARE was founded as a propaganda arm for Hamas. So what if we found evidence that she was parroting the same kind of propaganda from the halls of Congress that CARE is putting out? Would that be grounds for at least a little intention? So Omar has gotten in trouble lately for making anti-Semitic comments. And the one that she really popped her head out with was in February. She said that the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, or AIPAC, was controlling U.S. foreign policy. The outcry from both the Republicans and the Democrats eventually had her retract that. But she seemingly has made going after AIPAC somewhat of her own personal jihad. Now, isn't it interesting that if you go to CARE and you look at their press releases, the main target of CARE is AIPAC. They attack almost nonstop. These are just 15 of the unbelievable, unaccounted things that CARE has published on AIPAC. Now, I'd like to point out that AIPAC does spend a lot on lobbying, but they do not give a single dime directly to politicians. But CARE does. Now, if there was evidence that CARE was giving money to Congresswoman Omar, in light of her criticism of AIPAC, that would be a little embarrassing, wouldn't it? Oh, it is a little embarrassing, isn't it? So is she a hypocrite, or is she spreading propaganda exactly as she's being told to spread? Omar's anti-Semitism is dividing the Democratic Party. Even Rahm Emanuel is writing condemnations for Omar's actions and saying, what are we doing? The divide amongst the Democrats eventually led to a formal House vote to condemn anti-Semitism. But what they ended up passing was a blanket resolution condemning all hateful language. So in other words, yeah, what Omar said was bad and anti-Semitic, but we're not going to call her out by name, and instead we implore people just to talk nicely to each other in general. It was ridiculous. But how can the Democrats not be in agreement to chastise Omar and condemn anti-Semitism? Did some outside lobbying group known for propaganda pressure Democrats to leave Omar alone and water down the anti-Semitist talk? Well, here's a photo taken at the Capitol just before the House vote. The man standing next to Linda Sarsour is Nihad Awad, the same man that was the head of and founding member of CARE and directly identified by the FBI as one of the Palestinian Committee members supporting Hamas.
Now, let me assure you something, that the situation is worse than you think it is, because those people who are supposed to help us push back on this issue are asleep at the wheel.
You know, they say that ministers and rabbis and Catholic priests, they shouldn't get involved in politics. I think that this is a time we should speak up. I'm here today because West Virginia is $784 million in debt, complete, absolute debt. Right here, they're building brand new houses. Now they've taken the white folks and black folks and they moved them down the road here to substandard housing conditions so that 321 Syrian Muslims can move down in this neighborhood in 2 months when these are completed. This is at a cost of $87 million. You see that funeral home over there? It is to be torn down in 2 months and a mosque is going to be built there. In 6 months, this place is going to be a Sharia zone, meaning no non-Christians can walk down here except Muslims. Now, why would they take white Americans and black Americans and throw them down over there in substandard housing and give this to the Islamic people who come here last month? You all remember on WOWK News? They come here 3 months ago, 321, and you all cheered and came down here and protested they could live here. They're living here free on your taxpayers' money while regular Americans are suffering down the street here. These Islamic people here, they get $400 for each child while the regular Americans get nothing. They get cars, they get phones, they get free health care. And regular Americans, black and white, they're suffering. When is America going to speak up for our people? Screw these Muslims and get them out. This is where your money is, West Virginia. $87 million of your tax money is right here while your own people are suffering. You want to raise taxes on cigarettes at $1 a pack. Meanwhile, everybody going to Kentucky and making Kentucky very wealthy people. You want to raise taxes on gasoline. Everybody going across the border to get it. You politicians, you need to speak up. You need to say, no, we're not having this. We have Americans suffering in this country right now. Here's your proof. 87 million West Virginia taxpaying dollars is going to Islamic refugees right here. Speak up, America.
Whenever you have a group of individuals who are beyond any investigation, who can manipulate the press, judges, members of our Congress, you're always going to have within our government those who are above the law.